I'd like to talk about social development, narrow competition, and global neurological maturity. A big concern for many, many parents, if not the vast majority of parents of any kids with special needs, and for many typical kids, is social development and social skills. And through the years, I think we've developed a lot of misperceptions, and I think we're subjecting our children to a lot of things that not only are not helping the development of social function, but are impairing that development and also consequently impairing the development of good self-image. Now, one of the foundational problems with the perception of what needs to be done for social development is the perception that to develop socially, we need to put children and expose children as much as possible to their chronological peers. Now, this perception, I think, is a very dangerous perception and a misperception. Now, the reality of school and social development is that the majority of children do not come out of that experience unscathed. Now, the reality is children who are spending their days locked into buildings for 6 hours with their chronological peers is an incredibly abnormal experience. As adults, we live in worlds full of individuals from newborns to geriatrics, from people with no education to people with 3 PhDs. People who have had limited experience, people who have had lots of experience. And as adults, our perception is pretty much, hey, we're different, And we're different because we're different ages, different experiences, different educations, different bases of what we function with. And that's perceived as okay, all right? Now we create this artificial environment of narrow competition, whether we're talking about 3-year-olds in a preschool or kids in elementary school or kids in high school. And there we are putting kids with a group of individuals within months of the same age. And the perception becomes, in that environment of narrow competition, is that everyone should do everything equally as well. And if you don't, you're broken. So the perception is, if you don't read as well as the group, you're a poor reader. You're broken in reading. You don't do math as well, you're broken in math. You don't run as fast, you're broken in running. All these little pieces, all right, are all opportunities, if you will, to damage the self-image of the child. And it goes beyond even basic skills. If you're not tall enough, all right, everybody's the same age, you should be as tall. You're short, or you're too fat, or it's a problem with how you dress, or you don't know the right music, or you don't like the right music, or you didn't watch that movie that everybody else watched. Right? It essentially creates virtually an impossible environment for all but a very few select individuals to fail in. And the perception has become, we need to put kids into these environments, and the more time we can put them into those environments, the better they're going to learn to function socially. Well, my experience has been exactly the opposite. My experience has been, if we take children and we provide them, number one, with lots of opportunities to be with adults, that's really good. Because hopefully adults have decent social skills. And hopefully adults can model good social skills. Hopefully adults have the processing ability to know how to relate to people with lower processing, as in children, and engage them socially. All right. Then another good experience for children is actually engaging with younger children, where they can kind of take the lead and they can help direct the interaction for the younger children. And then to be actually with older children. I can't tell you the hundreds and hundreds of times I've had parents come in and say, Johnny is great with adults, Johnny is super with little kids, and he does well with older kids, but boy, it's a disaster with his peers. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times I've heard that. And they're only a disaster with their peers in groups typically, all right? And the groups teach them that they're broken. Social skills are learned by positive experiences. Social skills are learned largely based on your global neurological maturity and your ability to, in fact, process what is being said and engage in conversation. A high percentage of the kids who have supposedly poor social skills are the kids who have poor processing, particularly auditory processing. And because that auditory processing is poor, the children cannot accurately understand, interpret what the other kids are saying to them. And because of that, they say things that are inappropriate, or they're afraid to respond and talk. Right? None of that works. Right? But again, if we're not putting the kids into this narrow competition, that doesn't become such a big issue. So if we want to develop good social skills, we need to develop good, strong processing abilities. We want to provide the child with lots of opportunities that are directed, structured opportunities. All right? For example, rather than throw your child into a mix of 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 other kids, now you start off with one other child or two other child, preferably in a structured environment where there is something organized going on and the children are participating together. All right? Rather than throw a bunch of little kids together and wish them luck. Neurodevelopmentally, I don't think that children should be with other children of their chronological age until they're at least 5, unless it is very supervised and very directed. Because they do not have the processing skills to know how to interact properly. There was a study that came out a few years ago that the educators, had a fit about. But essentially the study said that children who attended daycare or preschool for more than, I think it was 20 hours a week, were more aggressive than those who didn't. And my response to it was, well, of course they are. If your model is an adult, or if your model is a 3-year-old, guess who's going to learn the better social skills? 3-year-olds' way of interacting with each other is pushing, pulling hair, pinching, hitting. Right? They don't know how to do that. They don't have the language skills to verbally interact. The foundation of most social interaction is language. And if you've got to have the sequential processing to process the language, you have to have the sequential processing to then create the expressive language to communicate. And you have to have the knowledge base to have something to communicate about or to be able to interact based on whatever the subject matter is. So parents, if you really want to help your kids develop social skills, number 1, you talk to them a lot. You interact with them a lot. You perceive every opportunity you have to talk with them and take that. One of my pet peeves is restaurants that give kids crayons and something to color on. And I watch families in restaurants, and mom and dad are talking, and the kids are sitting there coloring, totally disconnected. That should be an opportunity for the parent. A family is out for a meal, which should be a social opportunity. And mom and dad, rather than interacting with the kids, taking that opportunity to teach the kids something, send the kids away, essentially. Here are your crayons. And I see more and more families where, even if they sit down at meals at home, And it used to be, it's impolite to read at the table. Well, it doesn't appear to be impolite now to work with your iPad or your little Game Boy or something while you're at the table. All right? Kids have learned, we're teaching many of our children not to be engaged, not to interact socially. Right? So number one, parents, interact with your kids, engage your kids, educate your kids, develop their sequential processing, build their knowledge base, build the base of information they have so they have something to talk about, and protect them as much as you can from the narrow competition that exists in so many of the environments for the kids. Thanks.